Sonia Priwieziencew. So Sonia represent Agrinatura. Sonia is a graduate of the Institute of Political Science and in Paris. She wrote her master thesis on changes in Polish agriculture. In 2007, she founded the Foundation for Agricultural Biodiversity AgriNatura, and in 2015 the Institute for Conscious Nutrition. She has been running a small organic fruit and vegetable farm in Mazovia since 2009. Which was the first in Poland to test the direct sale system, which is known as a community support agriculture, or CSA. For over 10 years, she has been carrying out projects and conducting training on organic farming, local processing, biodiversity, food sovereignty, ecotourism, and sustainable development. So I am handing over to Sonia. So Sonia.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes?
Yeah, we can hear you. And
okay, great. Wow, a good presentation of my CV. I guess I don't know where you found it, but it was nice.
So are you able to share your slide?
Yes, I hope so. Actually, 5 minutes ago, my computer went completely black. That's why I was like coming in and out. And I hope this won't happen during the presentation, but let's try.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see them now or not? I have to share again.
Yeah, you need to share it.
Okay, I share again. Okay, because it went completely black and now is it fine?
Yes. Now I see your slide, and you can.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I'm sorry because I had some questions for Irina, but because of this technical problem, I just didn't follow all she said. But she introduced quite a lot about this issue of traditional orchards and how important they are. And yes, so my presentation will not be very technical because although I am farming myself, I am not a specialist in agroecology. So what I will say will be more general and more from an organizational point of view, because we do projects on traditional orcharding since over 10 years. So I just want to underline the importance and share some experiences that we have. So traditional orchards. This is a very important issue in Europe because it was something very important in the European rural landscape, but more than 80% of these orchards disappeared during last 60 years. And this had, of course, a very detrimental impact on biodiversity. And what disappeared is not only the orchards, but also the knowledge about how to work with these fruit varieties, how to grow these trees, how to take care of them. So this is something we're really losing. And through our projects, we try to came back to this knowledge, but also, of course, to enhance it with some other modern, I would say, approaches like a more permacultural approach. But going back to the basics, what is a traditional orchard? Well, there are different definitions, but being quite simple, we can say it's a collection of tall standard trees, which means trees with a stem of at least 1.20 meter before the first branches in an area usually where there is permanent grassland, although they could be other things that are planted between the trees, it depends. And generally it's a mixture, it's not just apple trees, but it's apple, pears, cherries, plums, and also different varieties. And different varieties, usually older, more robust ones and more adapted to the local climate conditions. Although this also today is is a problem, because we have these climate changes and anomalies and droughts. But in general, these varieties are more resistant, and of course, it means they are more adapted to a sustainable way of farming or carding. Without using so many pesticides, insecticides, and other chemical products. Yes, so we have some pictures then of how these orchards used to look like, and very often they were planted very close to the house and used for basically for self-sustainability. That this is this cultural aspect about the food traditions as well, that we lose, also losing these traditional varieties. So next slide, we have a picture. Actually, this one is not from Poland. This is from an area in Austria, where they do a lot of work in restoring pear orchards. And this is an example of all the food process products they do from local pears. So actually in Poland, we're not as good in, let's say, official food processing, because there's a lot of regulations to go through before putting some food process on the market. But basically, these traditional orchards could be a very good basis for doing great local food processed products. And here we have only from pears, from example. So that's really nice. Okay, next slide, please. So we have all these social, economical, cultural functions, but of course, what's very interesting for us is this ecosystemic and biodiversity function of these traditional orchards. And we have a wide diversity of fruit varieties, which is a kind of living gene bank, yes, because this is some varieties that already are sometimes are lost, but are rediscovered through, for example, field research, when some pomologists go and look at orchards that are abandoned, and he finds some rare varieties, and we try to reintroduce them. As we said, these orchards are much less demanding in terms of maintenance, but of course it doesn't mean you don't have to do anything, especially the first years when you plant the trees. It's very important to give them a good start. But after, when they grow and they're high growing trees, they have a lot of ecosystemic functions, like they protect against wind and soil erosion, they regulate the water table, they create a specific macroclimate, so we can find some special plants like lichens on the branches. And most of all, they are a habitat, a home for many insects, small mammals, and birds, especially in the birds' breeding season. So next slide, please. Yeah, next, okay. Because these taller trees, which have really large crowns, they also support a lot of, okay, when we say here 1,000 different animal species, of course, including a lot of insects, but with the middle below, it's even more. So I think the next slide is about a study. Yes, I found a study which was conducted in 2014 in Poland in 66 orchards. And I put you the link to this paper, which was published in some research website and magazine. And they found that there is a very similar level of bird biodiversity in orchards that are completely abandoned, so already wild areas, and these traditional extensively managed orchards. So with a lot of insects, but looking at the bird species, there are especially wood dwellers and some other rare species. And of course, this is very different from the intensive commercial orchards. So that's really a good example of how this agroecological approach and growing food could really work well with the wild biodiversity and with the birds and supporting this biodiversity, and backwards, because the birds eat a lot of insects that are not beneficial for the orchard, so they kind of regulate this insect population. So this works really well together. Next slide, please. Yes, so here, for example, the species that we can meet in the orchards. So I have some problems with the English names, but I hope I translated them well. But this is typical birds of sometimes forests, sometimes areas that are at the border of typical rural landscape and forest landscape. And as I said, the birds also contribute to regulate the insect population. So it really is a kind of very beneficial mutual circle. And we have also to underline that especially in the breeding season, the birds need a lot of insects, because even birds that usually don't eat so much insect, they feed the insects to the small ones. So these habitats are very, very important for them. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so this is some examples of these birds that we can very often meet in this kind of traditional orchards, but that in a conventional agricultural landscape, they lose a lot of habitat and they start to disappear. And next slide, please. Yes, and what is a very important thing to remember, because we can do monitoring, of course, of plants, we can monitor insects when there can be a lot of research done from various points of view, but birds are one of the easiest things to count, to check, and they are also one of the best indicators of biodiversity, because they feed on all these animals, and because they need these specific habitats, because they have different needs in terms of nesting places. So actually it's, when you have a lot of different birds, that means the biodiversity in general is fine. And there are many studies on this. Actually, I used to work for BirdLife some years ago. So this is what came out of the research, that the best way of checking the biodiversity is actually to check the bird species and count them. So and as an example, please the next slide. Yes, the white stork. So this is a bird that is still very common in Poland. Yes, they come to Poland in spring and they go back to Africa in winter. And Poland has 25% of the world population of the white stork. Unfortunately, it's declining these last years. And this bird eats actually small mammals. So he's like at the top of the food chain of these small inhabitants of rural areas. So if this bird is present, it means there is a great biodiversity. Well, actually he's not typically connected with the traditional orchards, but the traditional orchards, for example, help the small mammals population to stay. So why we have a lot of white storks in Poland is not because of the traditional orchards, because we don't have so many, but because we still have a lot of small farming and a lot of biodiversity. So this is just all very connected. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, and just as an example of the work we do to restore these orchards, because in general what happened is that after the Second World War, in most of the European countries, these orchards started to disappear, either to be abandoned, either to be even cut, even sometimes by law. For example, in Germany, there was a law which forced people to cut these orchards and to plant new, in a new, more commercial, intensive way, and new varieties. So that was really a disaster. But also in Germany, a lot of people work now on restoring and replanting these trees. And we also have to remember that even though not all of them were cut, but still these trees have a length of life that is between 50 and 100 years. So if we want to keep them, we have to plant some new ones from time to time anyway, even if we don't cut them down. So we work on this topic together with the Social Ecological Institute, which is an association founded in 91 in Poland, and Agrinatura is a more new foundation because, as Pavlov said, we created it in 2007. And the Social Ecological Institute started with projects to make these new collections, these new tree collections, in places that are more fitted for, let's say, education, being model places, so like local schools, landscape parks, agriculture advisory centers. But then we saw that actually in individual farms, when the farmer is really interested, sometimes it works better, meaning we can plant it in a school, and we were thinking, okay, if it's in a school, it will stay for years and they will take care of it. But no, actually, some of these orchards were, after 10 years, they stopped to take care of it. So actually, it's maybe more worth it to work with the farmer that's really interested, because he will do it for himself. And so now we work much more with individual farms. And here you just have an example on the poster of how a collection of these old variety trees could look like. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, so since 2005, we had several projects, and one of them, if you're interested in this subject, was a European project on restoring the knowledge about how to take care, how to plant the trees, how to take care of them. And this was called European Specialists of Traditional Orchards. And I think on the website, there's still quite a lot of information if you're interested in this subject, including a very nice dictionary in 5 languages of the specific wording used for like grafting, names of, well, you know, all the technical names linked with the orcharding. And then we had a project which was supported by corporate donors because they wanted to plant trees in Poland, and first they wanted to plant forest, and we told them, okay, we don't need to plant forest in Poland, but we can plant apple trees. So during all these years, we managed to plant over 20,000 trees, and this is all high growing trees, old varieties. Usually this is in one farm we have at least 50 trees, so they are not so small, but this is because it's project based. So we organize a training, we found the trees, we have an expert from the Institute of Horticulture in Skierniewice, a pomologist that is very good in these old varieties, that makes a plan with the farmer, because he has to check, of course, the soil conditions, what varieties would the farmer want, but also which ones will be better adapted to the local soil and weather conditions. So he makes a plan, and then only we plant the trees. Okay, can you show the next slide, please? Yes, and as I already said, all these trees will be high-growing trees, which is of course much more difficult for for picking the fruits, but this is the really ecosystemic function And also these trees live longer than the dwarf, you know, commercial varieties. Okay, and next slide, please. Okay, and this is some examples of these traditional varieties, and I put the Polish names, but some of them, of course, like Belle de Boskop, or well, are functioning in English and or in German, or their French names. But you see, this is a very wide range of varieties that could be found, and that are now very difficult to be found on the market because they are not commercial varieties. So we like, but people like them. People there, this is this all cultural aspect of people remembering the taste from the childhood. So really being happy when they can buy these fruits. Okay, next one. Yeah, so this is just some example of how the fruits can look like. This is the costella, a fruit when there is a whole story linked with one Polish king about this name, but I won't tell it now. Next one. Yeah, this is, for example, very, very big apple. It's an enormous apple that could weigh, I don't know, it's really big. Okay, next one. Or for example, this is an English variety, and each of these apples, this is really a whole knowledge of how to store them, how long they can be stored, when they are mature. So a nice thing is also you can plant an orchard in a way that you really have fruits all along the season and could keep them very long, because you plant very early varieties and you plant very late varieties and you're like never out of food. Okay, next one. Yeah, that's another example. Just you can look at the slides later. This one is of German origin, and this one is maybe you know the name because this one is a quite famous one. Okay, and next one, please. Yeah, that's just a picture of an apple. Yeah, and this is just very quick table of natural plant protection preparations that could be used to protect against some of the typical diseases that the fruit trees can be prone to. And okay, I won't get into details, but as you see, you can make extracts, decoctions, infusions, or, you know, this fermented concentrate. I don't know the exact name in English, but this is typically done from nettle. But there's many plants that could be used, yes, like rhubarb, chamomile, horsetake, of course, onion, garlic, as most of people know it. And this is really effective when you have the resistant variety and then you use these natural preparations, you usually get really good results. Okay, next one, please. Okay, and so now the way we work, well, we have a sponsor that sponsors some trees, and we organize, so we like look for volunteers in Poland that want to plant them in their farm. And of course, they have to take part in workshops because they have to learn how to plant the trees, how to take care of them. They have to fence the terrain. They have to prepare this plan with the specialist, and we monitor how the orchard goes during 2 years. And as we do it from a long time already, there are some very interesting outcomes, like sometimes it happens that the trees really give fruit very quickly, because usually when you plant these kind of trees, so you plant trees that are already 1 or 2 years old, you take them from the nursery, and then usually they give fruit about only in the 5th year, I would say. But some people take so well care of them that they already give fruit in the 2nd or even 3rd year. So we really see interesting outcomes there. And also sometimes we agreed to plant them in places where the soil was not so good. So our pomologist was saying, oh no, that will not work out. But really with enough care, they do really well. And without any chemical products whatsoever. Okay, and next slide, please. This is an example how a plan looks like. So we have a field which is, for example, 50 meters and 50 meters, and we have the different varieties, and we plant them. They have to be enough space between the trees, because as they are high growing, it's at least 5 meters between the trees. So this is of course not the typical food forest or permaculture where you have to plant other species in between and make it probably more dense. But this is a traditional orchard, but this could be a basis to try other more food forestry or more permacultural approaches. Okay, and next slide, please. Actually, this plan was the orchard in my farm. And the trees we take from basically one tree nursery that specializes in these old varieties and robust growing rootstock. One specificity, because they don't have the organic certificate. It means that with the current regulation, we cannot plant the trees that we give from this nursery in an organic farm. But of course, if you have an organic farm, you can buy trees like this from an organic grower. You just have to do a little research and buy the trees yourself. In our project, we don't buy the organic ones, because anyway, by the time they have grown, they can be organic anyway. But there is a problem if your farm is already certified. You cannot just take trees that are not certified, or you have to get some exemptions and so on. Okay. And next one, yeah, so this is an example of how the trees look like before planting. And so we plant either in autumn or in early spring. And usually in autumn is better, because then they have time to take roots. If in spring it's warm too early, then the trees, you know, they have leaves very quickly and they don't have time to grow the roots. So sometimes there could be problems. They could get too dry and just not survive. So it's usually better to plant in autumn. And next slide, please. Yeah, and this is some example of the workshops and the planting. And we even have some nice cases where we didn't plant in one farm, but for example, an area that was belonging to a whole village or community, and the villagers agreed that they will do it together and they will take care of this orchard together. So it will be like a kind of public orchard for the whole village. And there's a lot of interest in Poland. I could say, I think there's now a whole movement, a lot of people that are interested in these orchards and doing them also outside of our projects. And I think more and more people are interested in it. And I think it's a really good thing to do, both for us and both for biodiversity. And so I think we're coming to the last slide. Yeah, that's just some examples of apples. And as a conclusion, I would say this is, well, the traditional orchards were kind of first agroforestry settings. So we have to give that credit to the ones that started it long time ago before us, and kind of use that knowledge that we can, of course, enhance with other ideas. And this is really, I think, a long-term investment in a sustainable future, because these trees have also a long length of life. So something to promote and to include in your permaculture and polyculture projects. Thank you. That will be all.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for your wonderful work and wonderful presentation. So I'm just checking the question. So the question from Paul, great to hear about the focus on bird population for indication of high level of biodiversity, and congratulations on all of those three planted. Okay, so we are open for more question. So my question is, to what extent your project is commercial, and to what extent it is funded by some programs, and what you think is the best model?
Sure. Our project so far is not commercial at all. So it was sponsored by actually two business sponsors. So just companies that came to us and said, we would like to fund something in Poland. And we said, okay, let's do that. I mean, the current part of it, yes, because before it was other funds, but it was never commercial. And what we found is that we fund the trees and we fund the workshops, but the farmers have to give the land, fence the land, plant the trees, and attend the workshops. And that works very good. But of course, it means that it's not a big budget. So that's why we only take farmers that will plant at least 50 trees, because if you want to plant 10 trees, well, you just can buy them yourself. Yes, I mean, it's not very expensive, but of course, it's good to get some knowledge, but a lot of knowledge is also available on the internet, maybe not always in Polish, but in English, you can use Google Translate anyway. And usually we accept people that attend workshops also for free. So we don't, so it's not a commercial project, but of course the nursery that produces the trees, we pay them. So they have a commercial activity, and they just have a commercial activity. And usually over the years, we see it's not big farms, it's small farms. So, but for example, we know one farmer that does has about a big juicing machine, and he actually produces a lot of fruit juice and he sells it. So it has already quite a good economical aspect. So at the level of farms, I think people know what they want, and after 5 years, they already can use the fruits, and if they want to go into official food processing, of course, the costs are a bit higher. But in general, I think from the point of view of an organization, we're not a commercial organization. Yes, so that's why it's not a commercial project, but we see more and more farmers that are interested in it, and they think how they will use the fruits, and they manage, I think, to make it economically interesting as well. Yeah, but in general, as I said, it's high growing trees, so it's not typical, well, we have a very good model in Austria, because they really food process, and they do a lot of marketing on the food processing, but also from an ecotourism point of view. This is an area when they, they really promote these pear trees. And so actually you can make a lot of things around the orchards, because in general, I think most people love orchards. This is something, this is beautiful, this is flowers, this is fruits. So there's, it could be used in many ways. But in general, at the basis, it should be some passion, for that.
Because we also, like, I think that basically, like in every country, we have also this movement to preserve old varieties, and we collect experience internationally. And at least to my understanding, still maybe the best way is private gardens, is for subsistence growth.
Yes, yes.
So just our task is to make it as simple as possible for people. So I like your idea with these workshops. And another idea I just heard from other conference participants, it could be like a fruit tasting. And because even like during my lifespan, I'm 38 years old, the set of varieties of apple changed at least twice. So that is just so impressive, and so some young people could taste something that they never tasted, or maybe they have some memory from childhood, and if they could just immediately buy some tree and bring and plant, so I think
absolutely, absolutely. And I would like to emphasize that there's really a lot of exchange that could be done at European level, because really in Germany and in Austria, they've done a lot of work on this, and especially they already managed to get that step further, you know, into the food processing and into the marketing of the products and into the ecotourism marketing. So, and there are also a lot of people passionate about orchards there. But of course, the starting point is people have to plant an orchard and to take care of this, yeah.
Do you know, is there any recognition of ecosystem services provided by these traditional orchards?
There were some subsidies at some point in Poland in the agro-environmental schemes. So in this EU, European Common Policy, there was a scheme. Now in Poland, they stopped it. They stopped it a few years ago. I don't know how it is in other countries. So I don't know if at EU level, it's because, you know, there's the EU level, but then each country can choose how they apply exactly and what they give the subsidies for. So I don't know if it's still kept at the EU level, but at some time it was possible. So definitely, there was a recognition, yes. But after, right now in Poland, there are no financial subsidies for keeping these traditional orchards, or they're really, or maybe they are. Łukasz, yes, you know something?
No, unfortunately, you're right. There were subsidies, but they were cut off. So
yeah.
Every single project, we also work together. I also got many trees from Sonia and from Agrinatura, and we tried to plant them in these polyculture systems. But no, there is no help from the government to support our research and to support the spreading of the knowledge and experiences that we come up with. So,
but there was. So if we come back to the documents, for sure they know that there is an ecosystem. There's a lot of research on this ecosystemic functions also at EU level. But after politics is politics, and
what we've experienced is that there was huge interest, not from the government, but from places like art museums. For example, the local art museum in Łódź, and we collaborated with an artist from Germany, Antje Majewski, and after a year of doing the project in Poland, we went to Germany, to Mönchengladbach, and we've done a similar project over there, collaborating together with the orchardists and pomologists from Germany. So this came like a root initiative. Local groups formed, and we worked together. So yeah, there is of course a possibility to spread the knowledge around and to share the knowledge about old varieties and all the lost art and wisdom of orchardists. Yeah, but we can do it locally. So this is I think this is the power.
Yeah, of course, there are many mechanisms, but like what we are trying to do now with this policy regulations, that it's just us who recognize these services and who value it. So if we don't advocate it, who will do this? So we shall do this to some extent, and thank you for these inspirations and thank you for this publication. So we will try to find definitely more data on that.